By the 1830s, the East India Company controlled a sprawling territorial footprint across the Indian subcontinent, governing millions of people and managing vast, complex regional economies. Yet, despite acting as a sovereign ruler, the East India Company was, at its core, a profit-driven commercial corporation, accountable to shareholders in London. Trying to execute this dual mandate, extracting maximum commercial wealth while simultaneously attempting to administer civil justice, created severe internal friction. The company was relying on ad hoc, patchwork administrative practices, originally designed for a trading outfit. These structures were actively failing under the weight of managing a newly acquired, continent-spanning empire. Resolving this tension required the British Parliament to intervene with a structural overhaul, entirely redefining the legal and operational nature of the company. That legislative intervention was the Charter Act of 1833. This legislation explicitly stripped the company of its historical trade monopoly, eliminating its commercial identity and transitioning it into an administrative organ. Without independent revenue, the East India Company was forced to act strictly as a proxy, governing on behalf of the British Crown. Over the next few minutes, we will look at the exact mechanisms this act used to build a unified imperial architecture, step by step. Grasping the precise mechanics of this specific transition is required to understand the subsequent constitutional development of modern India. The immediate and most visible provision of the 1833 Act was the complete eradication of the East India Company's trade monopoly in India. The market was instantly forced open. This allowed free trade to flourish and invited broad competition from other British merchants who were previously locked out by the company's charter. With the commercial mandate erased, the single objective left for the company was governance, which presented a massive logistical challenge, unifying the vast territories they already controlled. Looking at this map of Hindustan, notice the uncoordinated nature of early British governance. Power was fragmented across distinct presidencies like Bengal, Madras, and Bombay. The 1833 Act solved this by elevating the Governor-General of Bengal to Governor-General of India. For the first time, this established a highly unified governance structure, placing absolute executive authority over all of British India in the hands of one central office. The sheer physical scale of the Government House in Calcutta conveys the gravity and permanence designed to house this newly centralized administrative state. By eliminating the commercial monopoly and centralizing executive leadership, the Act effectively replaced a patchwork of corporate trading hubs with a single, synchronized imperial machine. A unified executive requires a unified rulebook. You cannot run a central government if regional outposts retain the power to write their own competing legislation. Up until this point, presidencies like Bombay and Madras enjoyed high levels of regional autonomy, including the authority to draft and implement their own local laws. The Act systematically stripped these local presidencies of their lawmaking capabilities. All legislative power was pulled from the provinces and consolidated into a single central entity, the Governor-General in Council. This established a rigidly structured, top-down legislative process that applied universally across the entire subcontinent. Establishing this legislative monopoly permanently removed any regional autonomy, securing absolute and unbreakable policy control at the center. Writing centralized legislation is only half the equation. A unified state must also enforce it consistently through a uniform legal code. Previously, the company's courts were plagued by a chaotic, overlapping maze of competing regional laws and localized customs. To resolve this, the 1833 Act mandated the statutory creation of the Indian Law Commission. The British government appointed Lord Macaulay to lead this extensive initiative. The Commission's primary objective was to aggressively codify Indian laws, replacing decades of legal ambiguity with a clear, structured framework. The resulting work laid the structural groundwork for the penal and civil legal systems still utilized in modern India. Standardizing the law ensured that the central government's authority could be applied uniformly, without the friction of competing local traditions. A centralized imperial government and a unified legal code require a massive, capable bureaucracy to actually run the machinery. To address staffing, the 1833 Charter introduced a distinctly modern administrative reform. It explicitly stated that the inclusion of Indians in government services should be determined strictly by merit. This policy directive aimed to remove the traditional racial, religious, and caste barriers that had previously restricted administrative appointments. While the actual implementation of this policy was heavily delayed and flawed in practice, establishing the theoretical baseline of a non-discriminatory bureaucracy formed the final required pillar of a modern administrative state. The Charter Act of 1833 served as the definitive constitutional blueprint for the British Raj, entirely discarding the prior era of localized corporate privilege. Let's review the 5 specific structural pillars that built this new state, starting with the end of the company's trade monopoly. This forced the permanent transition of the East India Company from a commercial entity into a dedicated administrative body for the Crown. The second pillar was the absolute centralization of executive administration directly under the newly created Governor-General of India. The third was the monopolization of legislative powers, securely within the Governor-General's Council. Fourth was the standardization of justice through the Indian Law Commission led by Lord Macaulay. And the fifth pillar was the introduction of social reforms that initiated a theoretically merit-based administrative system. These 5 pillars did not operate in isolation. They formed an interdependent system, a centralized executive drafting uniform laws, enforced by a standardized legal code, and managed by a dedicated bureaucracy, creating an inescapable web of imperial control. Grasping the precise architecture of the 1833 Act is an absolute prerequisite for successfully analyzing the entire subsequent trajectory of Indian constitutional history.